from a decentralized location. This is the Crypto Effect.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Crypto Effect. It is May 27th, and we have just survived the Bitcoin crash of 2021 that we saw last week. It happened last weekend, and we kind of saw it kind of tinker off here a little bit. We've been hanging around the 38,000 mark. So we're going to do a quick recap of Bitcoin. I've got Warble here with me. Warble, how was your week?
Not too bad, Brad. Not too bad.
Yeah. How did you feel about this crash that we had last week? What that made? How were you dealing with it? I know you've been in this for a while, but how have you been dealing with this during these times?
It's interesting because I've actually one of the things we want to talk about on today's show is we want to talk about Dfinity and specifically the internet computer. So I spent a lot of the week, really not paying much attention to the charts. Really kind of doing a lot of research, so it really didn't bother me that much.
So when these events are happening, you choose just not to look. It's better to not look at it, and then when stuff starts coming back around, then you'll get back into it. You'd prefer, or do you like to take take this as an opportunity and get more reinvested?
A little bit of both, I guess. I mean, I don't like to pay a lot of attention to the charts. I don't really pay attention to the price that much anymore. I did see something, I believe it was from Orion Protocol. I think it was one of their lead devs was saying, during these price declines, he said, we don't pay attention to the price. We just keep building. And, so I think if you keep in mind, this is a technology that can potentially change the future of monetary, transactions and the finance system and things that are broken. I think that's why, that's why a lot of the, you and I and a lot of the original people that were part of crypto, the drops really don't matter that much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we saw this. We've experienced this many times, and I remember the 2018 crash, and then of course there was even a crash that no one talks about, and whether you call it a crash or not, but whatever. During the pandemic last March, crypto went from like 12,000, 11,000 maybe down to 3,500.
Yep,
that's huge.
It is. And I think they're all corrections, though. I don't know if I would classify any of them as crashes as much as I would classify them as just a correction. I think a part of the problem is you've got, and I think we were talking about this before, you've got a lot of people that are new to the space, and they see the price going up, and they just figure the price is just going to continue to go up. And keeping in mind, of course, that a lot of these people aren't traditional investors. They're not familiar with any of the financial aspects of markets, whether they correct or don't correct, or they keep going up. And you've got a lot of people that are irresponsibly hedging against, either they're really long or they're short, and they get liquidated. And but I think at the end of the day, I think building on the space is a great way to to not be absorbed by price.
Right. And someone was talking about this today, and I can't remember. I think it was just I was talking to a friend about this today, and they were talking about the people who have made a great amount of wealth in this space have done it over time. They have taken their time investing in the dips, continuously buying and slowly growing their wealth, and over a period of time, all it does is go up. Now, yes, we see these backdrops, but if you do it correctly and you're buying it and you're not greedy by leveraging your position, borrowing against it, all these type of ways that are that's causing these fluctuations, you will get your opportunity in time. So, and it goes to say, especially with what just happened last week, take your time, invest in this, and you will build your wealth. So yeah, I mean, I did kind of I wouldn't say I panicked. I didn't panic sell, which was probably great for me, but I did average down on my position. I took some new positions, and then I've been trading the down, which has worked out well to some extent in my favor, by basically selling the highs and then buying back the dips. So that has worked out well, and so it's been a crazy week. It's been a crazy week with a lot of speculation of what's going on, and then of course after this big drop, we haven't seen Bitcoin do anything else, which in all aspects is probably more of a good thing.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other aspects I think that are worth mentioning too.
Uh-huh.
Is it really comes down to risk, and if somebody has a good concept of what they find to be risky and they're with what they have to invest, I think it's something you have to keep in mind as well. You're not going to risk more than you can afford to lose on these things, but also fundamental analysis. If you're investing in projects that are there for the long term, they're not fly by night projects, then it really shouldn't make any difference what the price is.
Right.
Because in the long term, if those projects are successful, you have that, you can follow that trend line up.
Yeah.
So there's two things there, I think, that a lot of people really, should consider as well when it comes to corrections.
Yeah. So here's my chart that I was actually charting on for Bitcoin and kind of trying to determine where we're at in this, in this downturn. And you can see it gets kind of crazy, especially when you get up close and you start looking like, what the heck are you doing over there on your like, what's going on with your chart, dude?
The classic head and shoulder pattern.
The classic head and shoulders. Ooh, scary. And you can actually see, the my pitchfork still up here, and we have not regained trend line position, which would be right in this kind of this purplish area. The bull run kind of pulled us up and put us way up here in this high running bull run, but we've come back down. We have not regained position of that, but going in close. I was just kind of charting in, and like I said, I was averaging down my position. So basically, I'm selling when it's low, and I'm trying to buy back when it's high, and just regaining some of some regaining getting more coin during the downturn. So, and I'm not going to talk about all that. I don't really want to talk about all that, but we can see that for the last after we hit that bottom right here, actually over here we hit the double bottom. We did create a head and shoulders, and then we've just kind of been in this swaying pattern, and it's been staying like that, which is good. We don't want to see a lot of high fluctuations in either direction. We want things to level off. Liquidations should be over. Sentiment is getting back to reaccumulation, and hopefully we can see things start moving in the direction of whether it's going to be the direction of up or down. But I think once we did hit that double bottom and we've come back up and we've kind of been staying there, is definitely a good sign. Ethereum doing very similar activity. Actually, most cryptos are doing similar activity. A lot of them are following with the Bitcoin trend. But we saw Ethereum kind of come down here, not quite that far, but 1700. Man, I wish you would have got in on that. Oh my God,
that would have been a good buy.
I did not hit that, but that would have been a good buy. But you can see, like, even on the trend line for Ethereum, the red is really that's kind of a high trend line that's coming out of a bullish sentiment. But as long as we're staying right here on this blue line, we're in a nice trend bull run, and you can see that it came down and came past, it came out of the pitchfork and actually came back up, and now we're riding that blue line again, which is really good. I did chart a little bit of expectations of what I would kind of expect to see if things start turning bullish again, kind of coming up here and then slowly riding up. And you can see over the next, what is this? What do I have charted here? 2 months. And with an expectation of Ethereum to get into the 4,100 to 4,300 phase, even hitting by the end of the summer up to $5,200. So that's, that's a bullish sentiment, of course, but I think Ethereum's looking really good. And then I was going to actually hop over from Ethereum over into our other topic. So speaking of Ethereum, one of the big news of the week was Carl Icahn. Carl Icahn, billionaire investor. Everyone knows him if you're an investor in the stock market. This guy buys everything. Is looking at purchasing $1.5 billion in crypto. Now, this isn't like confirmed or anything. I don't think he's actually bought anything. He's actually just talking about his firm getting invested in crypto. Now, this would be huge, and I think he was actually talking about Ethereum.
If I'm not... he did mention Ethereum specific, but it was interesting because he mentioned he kind of went on to say DeFi, which could mean many things, because anything that's not Bitcoin, it really is considered to be DeFi, right? And that could be Polkadot, that could be Solana, that could be Orion Protocol, all the coins and tokens we've talked about. That could be any one of those. And so that's the piece for me that I found kind of fascinating. In fact, if Carl Icahn jumps on DeFi, I think it'll open the floodgates, especially if he jumps onto Ethereum. I think it really opens the floodgates into big institutional investors starting to get in on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, if and it takes these guys to basically start the lead. Once these guys take the plunge, all your CNBC, peeps online, and everyone's going to be going, we knew it. We knew crypto was the future. We've been trying to tell everyone, and they're so full of crap. And it's just like, it's these guys that are going, once they start investing, once they start seeing the potential, it's just going to be a floodgate, dude. I mean, this is like, and most people are just becoming aware of what the crypto actually is. For the longest time, I think they thought it was just a made up token, a made up thing. They didn't realize it was a technology.
And I think the other interesting part about that is the more large investors get involved in this space, the more the regulatory landscape needs to clarify itself. And I think I shared something with you this past week on our Discord channel. There was an op-ed, I believe, in the Wall Street Journal that was talking about, the potential of cryptocurrency being deemed illegal to prevent things like ransomware attacks.
Yep.
But as time goes on and more large investors jump in and governments define the regulatory landscape, it would not make any sense whatsoever for that to happen. So, billionaire Carl Icahn, if he jumps in, again, it opens the floodgates, and I think we see even more adoption in more mainstream media attention.
Yep. So, keep a close eye on what this guy does, because once he takes that plunge, I see it. It's both a good thing and a bad thing. Because like what you were saying, these guys are going to want regulations. They're going to want to own the market, and they're not going to want these wide fluctuations. So they're going to call on the government. They've got the money to do it, to start regulating this stuff. So although it may be good, or I'm sure it will be good, it may bring about less volatility and maybe even less growth. And to be honest, that may sound like a good thing, but it's the volatility that is what people love. It's scary, but once you get over the scare, once you get over the realization of what the potential behind what volatility can do, you actually start to benefit and like that volatility. Because I invested in the stock market for years. If you got 10% in a month, you were like a baller. Okay, these things do 1,200% in a week, and never in the world has anything like that ever existed. And that's what people love about it. So we'll see. Definitely keep an eye on that. Another good thing happening in the crypto space, though, was PayPal allowing you to export your cryptocurrency. So before you could buy it, but it basically had to stay on the platform that you bought it on, which kind of defeated the whole purpose of the crypto. Not being able to pull it off of whatever platform you bought it, kind of like Robinhood, still not allowing you to do that. But then moving it to your own personal wallet, which lets you do pretty much whatever you want with it. So if you wanted to trade it for other things, swap it, put it on a DeFi and stake it, you couldn't do all that, but now you can. So this is pretty good news that they're jumping on this bandwagon.
Yeah, and I also heard one of the projects we've talked about in the past, UTK, really is pushing this with their marketing now, and they're saying, well, UTK is, we allow people, markets, to take crypto for products. And, so UTK is basically saying, with this move by PayPal, all of a sudden we have opened up for our vendors that are taking crypto using UTK. We've opened up the ability to accept crypto from millions of customers potentially, now that PayPal is letting those customers export their crypto from, PayPal. So this is a big move, and it's actually kind of exciting to see PayPal actually do this.
Yeah, it is exciting. So it should be, and hopefully is, the first step to most of these other platforms kind of opening that up, like Robinhood. Again, you can buy a lot of different cryptos on Robinhood, but that's pretty much all you can do is buy it and then trade it or just hold it. Which doesn't really open you up to the world of the crypto space. It just kind of allows you to trade it. So hopefully that more and more places where you can purchase it start allowing you to do this. So this just opens the door to make it easier for people to start actually dipping in the space. Because I'm telling you, once you dip your toes into this, it's over. And again, it goes back to the volatility. When it works in your favor, you absolutely love it. And even when it doesn't work in your favor, you can make it work in your favor. So
yeah, and I'm also curious if this causes Amazon to make any moves. I do remember seeing one other thing that came up this past week, where there was a hint that Apple actually had a job posting for a cryptocurrency, a director of cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And I also found that to be interesting. So it is just a matter of time before we start to see these traditional companies out there that have dealt with fiat forever. They're going to start to really open it up to the crypto markets as well. And this move by PayPal is just one of many to come, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So to the main topic of the video, a coin that we kind of discovered. I don't know. I guess I heard about it for the first time about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Warble, you brought it to my attention, wanting to talk about it again. It's one of the I feel like it's probably going to be one of the biggest cryptos in the space. They did launch, I think, just a month or maybe 2 months ago at max. They were hosted on CNBC. They were talked about on NASDAQ. I mean, they're a pretty big platform, and this is ICP, the Internet Protocol. Their website is dfinity.org, and this is going to be what I feel is probably going to be one of the biggest cryptos, or one of the biggest companies and ecosystems in the space. But they're basically looking for development of basically a new internet communication system.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you that I think this is going to be one of the biggest companies, and organizations, I guess, is probably a better way to put it, within the next few years. And I certainly think they're going to really give traditional companies like Amazon and Microsoft and some of the other big hosting companies out there like Rackspace, I think they're going to give them a run for their money, and justifiably so, because digging into this company a little bit in the past week or so, a couple of the things that stood out to me is They've actually been in development since 2016.
Okay.
So this company, this organization, they came about in 2016, and their code base, was kind of kept under wraps. It wasn't being shared. It wasn't open source, and there was a lot of speculation as to how it actually worked and what it was comprised of. So their intention. So the Dfinity is the organization. The platform is called Internet Computer, and it intends. So their intention here is to replace legacy IT. That's really what their intention is. So again, it was built by the Dfinity Foundation, which is, by the way, a nonprofit organization, and they were founded back in 2016 by one individual, Dominic Williams. And we'll talk a little bit about Dominic and some of the other team members in just a second. But here's a number that blew my mind, is that Dfinity has 100,000 academic citations and 200 patents on their technology, which is just amazing. Try to find that in any other blockchain project, and you're not going to.
Right. Well, that's kind of the surprising thing, and I think this is partly why they were featured on CNBC, is because when you start getting into the background of who they are, they have a huge team. And these team members come from some of the top companies in the world, like 188 plus team members. For one, just right off the bat, that's huge.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of team members. And then when you start looking at just what they did in their careers, I mean, these guys came from, I don't think that's where they came, that's where they were featured. But I was in a section earlier and it showed where these guys were coming from. But they come from, geez, when you start looking at everyone that's on the team, they start coming from Apple, Google, Amazon. I was trying to remember everything, but it's basically like it's like a who's who of the Fortune 500.
Well, they do have one of the biggest, if not the biggest, teams in crypto. There's over 200 people on the core team. Some of the notable members, as I had mentioned earlier, Dominic Williams, his role, he's a chief scientist. He was the original founder. Interestingly, with him, I find is that his strong point is online gaming, his online gaming development background. And then you have people like Jan Kamich. He's the VP of Head and Research of Crypto. He was at IBM Research. You've got Johann George Gronstrom, who's the director of engineering. He came from Google. Andreas Rosberg, research and engineer, formerly at Google. He co-created WebAssembly, which is absolutely amazing. Benjamin Lin, engineer. He was at Google. Timo Hanke, he's a principal researcher. Now this is what I found interesting. This guy invented ASIC Boost, which is used to improve the cost and efficiency of Bitcoin mining by 20%. This guy's on the team. You've got this guy's name is hard to pronounce. Monish Mavahaidi. He's a senior researcher. He worked on scalable and fault tolerant distributed algorithms and consensus, and that's just some of them. I mean, these guys, they have an amazing team.
Yeah, I mean, you can look. They have their leadership, R&D, and operations. So that's a huge team founded in 2016. 3 research centers. They're actually operated in Switzerland, and 188 team members. So just from a standpoint of the operations and the money that they have to put these people to work, this is not your scam coin. You know what I mean? So they're building what is obviously looking to be one of the biggest ecosystems and one of the biggest changes in the internet since TCP/IP.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, definitely. So what is it, right? Because I know one of the things a lot of people talk about when it comes to ICP and the Dfinity Foundation, it's like one of their problems, I think, and at least from my perspective, and I think I've heard this from a lot of people, is how I don't understand their project. It's so complicated and complex.
Yep.
So I wanted to take a step back just for a second and compare it a little bit, not in comparison because they're the same, but compare it to what we have or what we're used to when it comes to decentralized finance. So, or even the current infrastructure that we're used to, right? So let's look at Ethereum for a second, right? So when Ethereum was released in 2015, their selling point was, we want to be the quote unquote world computer. That was Ethereum's selling point, and it still really kind of is Ethereum's selling point. So it's that world computer infrastructure, and again, key word, that's solving financial and collectible markets, and it does a great job, except the high gas fees. But nobody can argue that Ethereum hasn't really. I mean, they've done that, because if you think about it, there are so many distributed applications right now that I would consider to be top tier decentralized finance applications. Plus, let's not forget, we have NFTs. So I definitely think you can check both the boxes there for Ethereum and providing those financial and collectible markets. But the problem is it doesn't cover one core thing, and that is, where is that stuff hosted? How do those distributed applications get built? And then where are they ultimately living in the ecosystem? And I think this is where Dfinity steps in and says, okay, that's great, but let's tackle another bigger issue. And that's related to the way that the traditional internet works and the way that things are hosted. Tech monopolies. That's what Dfinity is trying to do here. So the internet computer concept of Dfinity takes away the big tech monopolies. And I think that's the key. So think about it for a second. Amazon, you've got AWS hosting, you've got Microsoft with Azure. These Dfinity is looking at this and they're saying, well, wait a second, let's step in here and let's try to be the stack replacement, right? Let's put ourselves where Amazon is, where Microsoft is, and let's be a decentralized stack. And I think that's the key. And when you think about that, think about it for a second from a security perspective. The security implications of blockchain technology for traditional stacks is absolutely huge, because as well as I do, DDoS attacks take down sites on a massive scale. That's a DDoS, and that's only one aspect of a cybersecurity breach, right? You've also got data changing. You've got, ransomware attacks. And the thing that Dfinity is doing is it's saying, let's replace the stack, but let's also add on top of that some of the things that we can do to prevent cybersecurity issues. Also, in addition to that, this is a game changer for dev teams, because this kind of goes back to developers that are writing Solidity contracts on Ethereum, right? So, for example, let's say that I'm a dev and I'm writing, I'm creating a project. It's a Solidity contract. Let's say it's a gaming site. Previously, I would write my smart contract, and it's going onto the Ethereum blockchain. And so I have this false sense of, hey, it's decentralized. Well, it kind of is, right? Because it's on the Ethereum blockchain. But this is a big point to make. Where is that living? It's still hosted on a centralized data center someplace, which means that's sitting in a data center in Virginia. It's sitting in a data center in El Paso, Texas. I mean, it's sitting in a data center in one central location, right? Going back to that tech monopoly, Amazon might not like my app, right? Even though it's on the Ethereum blockchain, Amazon might say, you know what? We don't think this is an appropriate website to be sitting on an EC2 instance up in Amazon.
Right.
So we're shutting it down. It's not replicated. It's not replicated.
Parler, right? They shut down. They didn't like Parler.
And that's a perfect example. Parler's a perfect example. And also another good example would be things like Facebook and Twitter and these tech monopolies, right? So they don't think the content is appropriate. They can shut it down. There's absolutely nothing the developers can do about it.
Right.
Again, Dfinity comes in and says, that's kind of a crappy thing to do. That's not the system that really should be the future of the internet. And so they came in and they said, how do we solve this problem? So here's some technical numbers for the infrastructure. Let's talk about the infrastructure of Dfinity just for a second. So currently with Dfinity, it's small. And that's the other thing. It is currently small in the grand scheme of where the company wants to be. So there are 12 independent data centers right now. And within those data centers, they're comprised of about 68 nodes. And I'll talk about nodes in just a second and what that means and how that fits into the ecosystem. The Dfinity Foundation does estimate or hopes to have over 100 data centers and 4,000 plus nodes by the end of 2021. Okay. Also, by the way, if anybody's interested, I did want to mention that you can go look at the source code. As of May 10th, Dfinity Foundation went public. In other words, they released mainnet on May 10th, at which point they also made the source code publicly available on GitHub. So if you go to github.com and then Dfinity IC, you can take a look at all their source code. So one block, another thing I found really fascinating about it is one block is produced in 1 second on mainnet at the mainnet launch. Again, Dfinity is saying eventually this is going to reach 1,000 blocks per second by the end of 2021 into 2022. So back to nodes, back to the data center concept. And keep in mind, again, I'm a dev. I want to produce an application. I want to make sure that this is available for everybody. I don't want it to be taken down by a tech monopoly. So how am I going to use Dfinity? How does it make sense for me? So again, we need to look at the concept of the data center. So within that data center, you have what's called a subnet. And a subnet is a collection of these nodes. And you can think of a node as it could be a server. It's a specialized piece of hardware. It's a server in general terms. Okay. And think of it as an analogy here might be Amazon Web Services. I can go and I can rent an EC2 instance. Okay. It's kind of the same thing. It's a node, right? The difference is on these nodes are what are called canisters, right? So canisters are actually just a fancy way for Dfinity to say, this is the software that lives on the internet computing platform. Okay, so the interesting thing about canisters, and this is where I think it benefits developers, canisters, the software that's sitting on the nodes within the data centers, this is code that can be written from any high-level programming language, which is really cool because if you think about Ethereum, I'm writing my code in Solidity. Whereas with the internet computing platform, I can write my code in Rust. And in fact, IC actually has its own programming language called Motoko. It was developed by some of the original founders. So you might wonder, well, what are these canisters? Like, what can I put on them as a developer? This is where it gets interesting. Canisters can be full-blown websites. They can be DeFi apps. They can be actual applications. Think about medical records. Think about EMRs and think about enterprise level applications sitting on IC. You've got the protection of this platform. you have the true decentralization of this platform. And we'll talk about that decentralization aspect in just a second. But where it's really cool is, let's say I develop a website, I throw it up on a canister. That canister, here's where I think this is where I think this separates it from the traditional sense. That canister is replicated on all the nodes on IC. So just think about that for a second. When you think about replicating that through all of the nodes on IC, you cannot take it down. You literally cannot take it down. It is an indestructible application at that point in time. And even better is that canister can talk to other canisters. So my app, I can write an API and I can talk to your app through an API. So my app can actually communicate with yours directly on IC without having any other issue with communication. I can do it directly through IC. And these canister applications, they have what are called states that are actually maintained across the IC. So if you think about corrupt states, right? Think about ransomware. When a ransomware attack happens, the state of an object, specifically in storage, is typically encrypted, right? So that state becomes a fully written to, because it's an encrypted volume at that point in time. So that state becomes a different state. So what happens in the case of IC is, if a state isn't agreeable across all the other nodes within IC, that state is not kept. It's discarded. So in other words, if somebody gets infected with ransomware, their state is rolled back. And the other states that are actually pure and accurate are the ones that take effect. So effectively, you're taking away that whole ransomware attack vector, which I find absolutely fantastic. But you have to wonder, how does it know? How does the system actually, how does it know how to maintain itself? Well, it goes even further, and there's something called the network nervous system. And I find these concepts to be so cool. I find this is an absolutely amazing algorithmic system that oversees the network. And when I read about this, I was like, okay, this reminds me of, are you familiar at all, Brad, with VMware hypervisors? So this network nervous system in IC reminds me, when I read about it, it reminded me of VMware's hypervisor. And specifically the HA, the high availability aspect of VMware's hypervisor. So if you think about it in that term, a node is a VM and another node is a VM, and you have the hosts. And this hypervisor says, wait a second, this node is not behaving, or this node has gone offline. This nervous system built into IC automatically adjusts and self-heals the network based on those algorithms that are written into it. So this manages things like subnets. It upgrades node protocols. It protects from malicious activity. And so it really is a self-healing network. It's absolutely amazing.
This is not to go off subject here, but this is the kind of stuff that I see that as we start getting more advanced in like AI technology, and we're trying to grow, especially AI technology, to make it smarter and be able to learn on its own and heal on its own and learn from its mistakes. I truly do feel like this is where things like ICP are going to take advantage.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned the AI thing, because that's also the first thing that I thought about. I'm like, this nervous system, this network nervous system, I find to be the most interesting part of this whole platform, to be honest. I would love to take the code from GitHub and just look at it. Would I understand it? No, but I'd love to still take a look at it, because I can't imagine, the work that must have went into writing that self-healing AI network. That network nervous system must be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the biggest problems that we've had, especially with trying to develop, or what I've read in developing AI technology, is that it's this centralized thing. So every time there's something that goes wrong, or something that needs to be done, someone has to go into a centralized server, and they write their code fixing whatever issue there is, and it's this repetitive process, and it's only as fast as the person developing it. And so with smart contracts and the ability for these computers to have what's like a nervous system, perfect name for it, I guess, really, to determine when there's a fault in the system on itself, whether it's the code, whether it's nodes going offline, whether it's a hardware fault, whatever it is. I mean, that is the antithesis of like what are the codes going to look like for AI technology.
Oh yeah, it is, and I was
So
just like, wow, this is really impressive. And so then I got down to it a little further, and by the way, what Brad has on his screen there, I highly encourage you guys to take a look at and go through, because as I was reading, I just was like, wow, this is the coolest project I've seen in a long time. You can tell it was in development for 4 or 5 years, because the amount of work that's gone into it has just been amazing. So it brought me down to, I'm like, okay, well, that's a very 30,000 foot basic view of how it works, right? But then what about like the fundraising, right? How the token sale history? I wanted to look at that. I'm like, how did this come about? In other words, how much did they raise? How much was the token, or when it first, when it was first in an ICO state? So it turns out that they actually had 3 rounds of funding, which I was kind of surprised, because I thought, well, I wasn't aware that, I was recently apprised of this. So I wasn't aware that it was even as old as it is. But back in February of 17 was when they actually had their seed round. At that time, the valuation was around $16 million. And get this, the price of the token was 3 cents.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was again in February of 17. And then from the what I'll call a seed round, they went to a strategic round, and that was in January of 18. Dfinity Foundation raised another 28.54 million. But interestingly, this was for 7% of their initial supply. So that is such a low number, 20.54 million for 7% of the initial supply. And then, of course, in August of 18, they went to a private sale in which they had 110 participants that contributed another 97 million. And that was for 4.96% of the initial supply, and $4 per ICP token.
Wow.
So about a year later, $4 per ICP. And we went from 3 cents. That's a big increase in percentage.
Yeah.
Now, the 2 things I took out of this that I really wanted to mention here, 2 interesting numbers on the token distribution. So, because I think this is an important one too, is how much does either a team, a founding team, the lead dev, whatever you want to call it, how much do they keep, right? Because that's always something you should keep track of, right? So 23.9% went to the Dfinity Foundation. The Dfinity Foundation, basically what their job is they manage the capital that was raised from these token sales, the ones I mentioned above. And they also oversee, endowments of the tokens. And these tokens, those that are held by that foundation, or already spent by the foundation, but they've spent it on research and development, operations. They've acquired technology. They've done a lot of community building programs and partner incentives. And I think it shows. I mean, when they have 188 team members, they've obviously spent a lot of time getting team members with that original capital that was raised. 18% went to team members. And again, that's important. Dfinity Foundation is a different thing than the team members. So 18% went to the team members. And again, there's around 188 team members. And so I think, the one thing I think that comes out of this when we're talking about, specifically the tokens, one, I think that the Dfinity Foundation has done a fantastic job, but it goes to show you how quickly the tokens from 2017 to 2018 and to where we're at now have gained a ton of value.
Yeah, $130 at the beginning or last week's dip. We did see a dip of down to around $88. I want to say, because it was a huge miss. I was actually pretty upset I did not get in. Because I've been looking at ICP since it launched, or since I just saw it on CNBC, in which it was around $400 something. Now I did get up to $640 before coming, skyrocketing down to $280 and then coming back up. And then of course we've seen this consistent dip, primarily due to, the big Bitcoin dump. But we have leveled off, and there seems to be a pretty strong consensus of the price being around $130.
Yeah. The one thing too I wanted to talk just a little bit about is the actual ICP token, right? So how does that play a role actually in the ecosystem? How does it get a value? Mm-hmm. So first of all, the ICP token is the governance token for this platform. And it has inflationary and deflationary aspects to it. Now, the interesting thing about the ICP token is that it is locked into a governance system that the Dfinity Foundation calls the neuron. And so when it's locked into a governance system, it creates a neuron, and that neuron earns voting power. And so let's say that you lock away 150, you lock away 200 ICP tokens. The more you lock away, the more governance voting power you have on their platform. So you can vote how the foundation runs things. You can vote in incentives and so on and so forth. The other part of that is that if you want to remove their governance token, you actually have to declare how much time you're willing to wait before that thing becomes what I'll call on state, and that can range from 3 months to 8 years. But the longer you declare, the more value or the more voting power that your neuron has. In exchange, you get more ICP tokens. But, so I wondered, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about this in terms of of computing power, right? So how does that work, right? How do I actually use this? Well, it turns out, and I find this really interesting, is that there's a stable coin on the ICP platform called Cycles. And Cycles is actually used to fuel computation. You can probably think of, or I don't know if it's a good comparison, but it's sort of one that maybe you think of Way, right, on Ethereum. That's the gas that powers the Ethereum smart contract network. Well, Cycles is a stable coin that fuels the computations on the IC network. So ICP, if I'm a dev or I'm a team and I want to put my stuff up on IC, I can actually convert my ICP tokens into Cycles, right? Cycles, again, are a stable coin. And I can use that as fuel for my computation or my canister. So my website, I'm going to host my website on IC. I can say I'm going to buy, 5 ICP tokens. And then my plan is over the course of a couple years, over the course of a year, I'm going to convert those into cycles so that I can fuel the computations that are needed by my canister, my app. And so what happens there is, interestingly, the reason it's a stable coin is that the Dfinity Foundation said, well, here's the problem is we need to be able to have a predictable model for developers and business applications to buy computing cycles. Because imagine if you were buying computing cycles on AWS with a really highly volatile volatile asset. I mean, that could cost you $5 one week. It could cost you $150 the next week. So they had to come up with a formula where if you're buying these cycles, you have to do it with a stable coin. And that's what Cycles is. And that allows you to buy computation power. And again, a good comparison would be Ethereum users paying gas fees. In the IC, developers are pre-charging canisters with cycles for a certain amount of computational units. So just a really, really fascinating project. And a couple of other numbers just wanted to throw out there. We have, if we take a look at the tokenomics a little bit, we have 26.43% of the tokens that are in circulating supply, which equates to about 124 million tokens. And the total supply right now, it sits at about 469 million tokens. And you know, I wasn't able to find a number on max tokens. So I'm not quite sure about that, but I can say that right now, as it stands at a price point of $129, that's with just over a quarter of the circulating supply. And on a fully diluted market cap, you know, I think we would see ICP at, you know, probably $600 to $700 on a fully diluted market cap. So definitely has room to grow. Pick this one up. That's all I can say. This is a very, very impressive project.
Yeah, I picked some of this up last week at the dip, and this is just going to be a hold position. I think for the total potential of this to actually become a huge growth coin, anything like Ethereum, there's still a lot of development, or you know, like there's going to have to be adoption. And so we're, you know, hopefully with the team that they have, I'm sure they've got plenty of money for the marketing. They can really start getting, you know, developers using this platform. And that, you know, that picture that I had up a second ago was actually a perfect example. And I wish I would have kept it up there. Yeah, right here. So this is actually a perfect example. So, you know, this is the third generation of this blockchain. First, it was Bitcoin. It's the digital gold is the standard. In 2015 was Ethereum. It was the smart contracts, and now they have the invention. It's how everything kind of gets fit together. So this really is like a third iteration of the entire system kind of being put together like a puzzle.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
So, you know, imagine, so in 2015, and Ethereum is reaching it's really one of its height of its positions 6 years later, you know, and it's growing faster and faster. Hopefully, ICP 2023, 2024, you know, who knows? It could be $1,000, but definitely growth potential here. So great project. I'm excited about it. This is a long-term hold for me. And yeah, I'm just going to be accumulating small amounts over time every time I see a dip. So great.
Yeah. One thing I did want to show too, I'll share my screen just for a second. I did want to show this is this was something that Dfinity put out. This is their Explorer, and these what you're seeing here is you're seeing the actual nodes that I had referred to data centers that host the specific nodes. So each of these blue dots represents a IC data center. So you can clearly see I think what they're trying to get at here is the fact that, yes, it is new, but also the fact that it is decentralized. And again, these data centers being comprised of nodes, and if I mouse over one of these, you can see below the word nodes here, Las Vegas data center nodes. There are 5 nodes in this specific data center, but all of these nodes replicate canisters. So my application, my web app, somebody fills a form out on my web application, that is maybe they started and they hit the node in Chicago. But what's happening is they put their name in. John Doe fills out my online form. John Doe's information in seconds, and remember the block time is very fast. John Doe's information is all of a sudden in Las Vegas, San Jose, Portland, Jacksonville. It's there in seconds, less than seconds. And think about that from a standpoint of DDoS. You can take down the Chicago data center, but you've still got all these other data centers that are accessible at the same time, and there's a couple of data centers in Europe as well. So I did think it was cool to mention this. And again, keep in mind, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that the foundation, by the end of this year, the foundation hopes to go from a handful of data centers to 1,000 data centers.
Yeah. I mean, you have to imagine, just to get where they've gotten, they've had to have had hundreds of millions of dollars invested to get these, where they're at. And so, there's some big money people out there who are funding these guys.
There absolutely is. And also, as I mentioned earlier, if you are interested, definitely check out the Dfinity IC code base to take a look at that. And one other quick thing I think was worth mentioning, Cory Doctorow, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, Brad, but he is, how do I describe him? He's very much in favor of internet privacy, very anti big tech, I guess is probably the best way to say it. And he talked at Consensus this past week about big tech monopolies. And so it's perfect timing for something like IC and Dfinity to come out, within the past 2 weeks with IC, because I think we're going to see a clampdown from either a regulatory level or people just getting sick of big tech trying to run the show and, take their data and do as they wish with it. And not to mention just people's data, but companies. How are they treating companies that are getting hosting from them? Cory Doctorow basically said, you know what, we need to take a stand against big tech, and we need to say, you know what, enough is enough. And so I think you're going to see Dfinity's platform get very, very highly adopted within the next couple of years as more companies want to get away from the grasp that these companies have over their information.
Yeah, it's definitely the new popular topic nowadays. So, and hopefully it does get picked up. So, I think this is the perfect timing.
But yeah, that's
nice.
That's
all right.
That's what I have.
Yeah, good review of ICP. Thank you very much, Warble. Appreciate it. Did a lot of research into that. That was way more than I knew about it. So I dug into it and I got the gist of it, but a lot of good information there. Is that all we had for this episode? Was the ICP? Is that all you want to talk about?
I think that was all I had. Yeah.
Because I don't have anything else.
There is one other thing. I did say that was all I had, but I do have one other thing I did want to quickly mention. And I believe I may have shared this in our Discord, but I'm not 100% sure. There's a podcast out.
Exit Scam. So there's Apple Podcasts. There's a podcast called Exit Scam, True Crime. Yeah, that's all I saw.
Yeah, so this is I just started listening to this, and what I found interesting about it is this is a series of stories that revolve around Quadriga CX. I don't know if you remember that. But Quadriga CX was the biggest Canadian crypto exchange. And, you know, it's an interesting story because the founder, I believe Gerald Cotton, had gone to India with his wife on the honeymoon to open an orphanage, and ended up passing away unexpectedly. He was the only person, literally the only person that was running Quadriga CX. It was an exchange that held millions of dollars for Canadians in cryptocurrency. And one guy had the private key for the entire exchange. He passed away. And when he did, he never left any of that information to his wife. So you had millions of dollars trapped in this exchange. Well, long story short, this podcast recounts from the very beginning, talks about, you know, did this guy really pass away? Or was there more to it? And I just really wanted to mention this because this podcast was excellently done. Very interesting story.
All right. Exit Scam. It's called Exit Scam by Treats Media, true crime podcast over this well, I wouldn't say Ponzi, but yeah, his this little scheme, possible scheme. I guess they're listen to the podcast is the point.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely check it out. It's pretty neat.
All right. Cool. Very cool. Yeah, we'll definitely check it out. Well, that's all we have for this episode. ICP Internet Protocol. If you want to hear about any thing else that you want to do a deep dive into, let us know in the comments, leave a like, and then we'll see you next week. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.